You think you know America? New Hampshire is the state that declared independence from Britain 6 months before anyone else even had the guts to think about it, hosted the meeting that literally redesigned the entire world's money system in a ski hotel in the middle of nowhere, and somehow convinced the rest of America that a state with only 18 miles of ocean coast is a beach destination. And that is just the first 30 seconds of this list. We found 71 things about New Hampshire that are so bizarre, so absurd, and so shockingly real that by the end of this video you are going to question everything your history teacher ever told you. And if the first fact already made your jaw drop, smash that hype button right now and send this to someone who thinks they know American history. Because they absolutely do not. 1. New Hampshire runs completely without a state income tax and without a sales tax. Yet somehow the roads get plowed, the schools open every morning, and the government keeps cashing its paychecks like nothing unusual is happening. Economists scratch their heads. Other states send confused delegations to figure out the secret. The secret, apparently, is that New Hampshire simply decided taxes were optional and then refused to collapse on schedule. Every other state is still waiting for the disaster that never arrived. 2. General John Stark wrote New Hampshire's legendary motto, "Live free or die," and Americans print it on license plates, tattoo it on forearms, and scream it at town hall meetings like a battle cry. What nobody mentions is that Stark himself spent his final years completely paralyzed and bedridden, unable to move, or utterly dependent on other people for everything. The man who authored the most aggressively independent motto in American history could not independently do a single thing. New Hampshire kept the motto anyway and called it inspirational. 3. New Hampshire declared independence from Britain and wrote its own constitution 6 months before Thomas Jefferson had even sharpened his quill for the Declaration of Independence. The other 12 colonies were still debating feelings while New Hampshire was already filing paperwork. John Sullivan stood in the assembly looking extremely pleased with himself. The rest of America eventually caught up, signed their famous document, and somehow got all the credit. New Hampshire has been quietly annoyed about this historical oversight for approximately 250 years, and counting. 4. A couple named Betty and Barney Hill were driving through Lincoln, New Hampshire in 1961 when they claimed something enormous and non-American intercepted their vehicle in the mountains. They reported missing time, strange beings, and an experience that made their therapist genuinely reconsider his career. The United States government did not laugh it off. Officials actually launched a formal investigation into what happened on that New Hampshire highway. Lincoln, New Hampshire, became ground zero for American alien abduction mythology and has never fully recovered its reputation as just a normal, quiet mountain town. 5. New Hampshire put the old man of the mountain on their state quarter, their road signs, their license plates, and their tourism brochures. The old man was a dramatic rocky cliff formation that looked exactly like a stern human face staring across Franconia Notch. Then in May 2003, the whole thing silently crumbled into a pile of rocks overnight with zero warning. New Hampshire looked at the rubble, looked at all the merchandise, and decided to keep selling everything anyway. The state symbol is now technically a pile of gravel, and nobody officially wants to discuss it. 6. Every other state in America is absolutely plastered with roadside billboards screaming at drivers about casinos, lawyers, and fast food. New Hampshire looked at that cultural tradition and banned the entire concept statewide. Driving through New Hampshire feels genuinely disorienting because the landscape just exists without anything trying to sell you something every 40 feet. Advertisers lobbied furiously. Billboard companies sent strongly worded letters. New Hampshire responded by doing absolutely nothing, and the ban has remained completely intact, making their highways look like a different country that simply forgot capitalism was supposed to be visible everywhere. 7. Concord became the capital of New Hampshire, and in the early 19th century it was growing faster than almost any other city in the entire United States. Historians noted the trajectory. Investors moved in. Everyone agreed Concord was clearly becoming something significant and unstoppable. Then it simply stopped. For 150 consecutive years, Concord grew at a rate statistically indistinguishable from zero. Nobody officially explained what happened. The city did not decline dramatically or collapse spectacularly. It just quietly decided that whatever size it had reached was the correct size and refused all further expansion without any public announcement. 8. In 1944, world leaders needed to completely redesign the entire global financial system from scratch after the devastation of World War II. They chose a ski resort hotel deep in the mountains of New Hampshire called the Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods. Delegates from 44 nations put on their suits and traveled to what was essentially a vacation lodge surrounded by ski trails to create the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. The global economy that every human being on Earth operates inside today was architecturally designed in a building where people normally go to drink hot cocoa after sledding. 9. New Hampshire shares the Atlantic Ocean with states like Florida, California, and Texas, and decided to stake its entire coastal identity on 18 miles of shoreline. 18 miles. A person with moderate athletic ability could walk the entire New Hampshire coastline before lunch. Despite this geographical humiliation, New Hampshire built hotels, erected beach umbrellas, opened seafood restaurants, and declared itself a legitimate beach destination with complete confidence. Tourists actually arrive every summer and pay premium prices to experience it. Travel writers describe it warmly. New Hampshire somehow convinced the tourism industry that quantity of coastline was never really the point. 10. The town of Dixville Notch, New Hampshire, has voted in every single presidential election since 1960 and takes this responsibility with magnificent seriousness. The total voting population is sometimes as low as 5 people. They cast their ballots at exactly midnight when the clock strikes 12, turning a presidential election into what sounds like a Halloween tradition. National television networks send camera crews. Journalists file breathless reports. So 5 people in a tiny New Hampshire mountain town wake up at midnight, vote, and the results immediately flash across every major news network in America, as if something historically significant just occurred. 11. New Hampshire is the only state in America where the government does not legally require adults to wear seatbelts while driving. The state motto is "Live free or die," and apparently the Transportation Department took that as a precise technical instruction rather than an inspirational phrase. Safety advocates have marched, statistics have been presented, and concerned pediatricians have written letters. New Hampshire legislators read everything carefully, nodded thoughtfully, and then voted to keep letting adults fly through windshields on their own recognizance. Personal freedom in New Hampshire apparently includes the freedom to become a projectile. 12. In 1833, the town of Peterborough, New Hampshire opened the first free public library in the entire United States of America. Peterborough had fewer than 500 residents at the time. This tiny New Hampshire town with one general store and unpaved roads decided that free access to books and knowledge was a public right before any major American city reached the same conclusion. Boston had not done it. New York had not done it. A small New Hampshire farming community beat every sophisticated American metropolis to one of the most important civic institutions in the history of democracy. 13. Someone in the New Hampshire state legislature sat down at their desk, picked up a pen, and wrote an actual law making it illegal to inhale bus fumes with the specific intent of getting high. This required a meeting. It required a formal vote debate. It required a formal vote. Lawmakers looked each other in the eye and agreed this situation was serious enough to require official criminalization. The law exists today in the New Hampshire Legal Code, fully written out, completely specific about buses and intentions, suggesting that at some point in New Hampshire history, this was genuinely considered an urgent public crisis. 14. Mount Washington in New Hampshire recorded a wind speed of 231 miles per hour in April 1934, which stood as the world record for naturally occurring wind speed for 62 years. The remarkable part is that Mount Washington is not some remote Arctic wilderness accessible only by helicopter. There is a road going directly to the summit. Tourists drive their personal family vehicles to the exact spot where the most violent wind ever measured on Earth occurred, and then they buy bumper stickers at the gift shop that say, "This car climbed Mount Washington." 15. Somewhere in New Hampshire, a government official in 1971 decided that sugar dispensers in restaurants were pouring too liberally and that this required legislative intervention. The result was an actual law specifying that sugar dispenser pour holes could be no wider than 3/8 of an inch. Diners across New Hampshire have been shaking their sugar packets at a legally mandated pace ever since. The law technically remains on the books today. A no sugar dispenser rebellion has been recorded. New Hampshire restaurants serve their coffee quietly. Their sugar flows at the government-approved rate, and nobody asks follow-up questions. 16. Everyone assumes Idaho invented the American potato because Idaho will not stop telling you about potatoes for even 30 consecutive seconds. The actual first potato ever grown in American soil was planted in Londonderry, New Hampshire in 1719 by a Scottish reverend named James McGregor, who carried seed potatoes across the Atlantic on his ship specifically for this purpose. Idaho arrived at the potato party approximately 150 years later and somehow claimed the entire legacy. New Hampshire grew the first American potato and received 0 credit, 0 themed festivals, and 0 novelty potato-shaped merchandise. 17. For Richard McDonald and Maurice McDonald were the two brothers who invented McDonald's, the restaurant chain that fundamentally altered human eating behavior across the entire planet. Both brothers were born in Manchester, New Hampshire. Every McDonald's location on Earth, every golden arch, every paper bag, every breakfast sandwich served at an airport at 5 in the morning traces its origin back to two boys from Manchester, New Hampshire. California gets mentioned because that is where they opened their first restaurant. New Hampshire, where the actual humans originated, gets approximately no acknowledgement whatsoever on any official McDonald's historical materials. 18. New Hampshire's state legislature contains 400 elected members, making it the third largest democratically elected legislative body on the entire planet. Only the United States Congress and the British Parliament are larger. Each of these 400 lawmakers receives exactly $100 per year as their complete annual salary. New Hampshire is paying its legislators 25 cents per working day to govern a state. Some New Hampshire lawmakers spend more money on gas driving to the State House than they receive in annual compensation. The entire governing assembly of New Hampshire costs less annually than one mid-level corporate manager in Boston. 19. New Hampshire's very first newspaper launched in 1756 with enormous ambition and immediately shut down after printing exactly one single issue. The printer's name was Daniel Fowle, and he was in significant debt before the first edition even dried. He published the paper, distributed it, watched it go out into the world, and then immediately fled town before anyone could present him with a bill. New Hampshire's entire newspaper industry began with one edition and one man running away. Fowle eventually returned, launched a second paper years later, and this time managed to print multiple issues before anything went catastrophically wrong. 20. New Hampshire passed a law in 1973 making it illegal to pick up seaweed from the beach at night. During daylight hours, seaweed collection is a personal choice New Hampshire respects completely. After sunset, the seaweed becomes legally protected. Officials debated this and concluded that enforcing seaweed collection laws in the dark was simply not practical. So rather than improve enforcement, they criminalized the darkness itself. Somewhere in New Hampshire, a person once stood on a moonlit beach, reaching toward a pile of seaweed, and made a choice that apparently required the state legislature to get formally involved. 21. The Piscataqua River forms the border between New Hampshire and Maine and moves with such extraordinary force that it ranks as the third fastest tidal river in the entire United States. Ships navigating it today still require special piloting certifications because the current is genuinely dangerous to modern vessels. Colonial traders used this same violent river as their primary commercial highway for over 150 years, loading and unloading cargo in conditions that would make modern harbor authorities file 17 different safety reports. Most New Hampshire residents have never heard of it and would not believe the speed statistic if presented with documentation. 22. New Hampshire contains a town called Success. Success has no grocery store, no gas station, no school, no church, and no permanent human residence whatsoever. The population of Success, New Hampshire, is exactly 0. Nobody lives in Success. Nobody has lived in Success for a very long time. The town exists entirely on paper as an official New Hampshire municipality with boundaries, a name, and a complete absence of anyone actually experiencing it. Every motivational speaker in America is within driving distance of a town called Success that is completely and utterly empty of human achievement or human presence of any kind. 23. The Canterbury Shaker Village in New Hampshire was home to a deeply devout religious community that practiced complete celibacy as a core spiritual commitment. No marriages, no romantic relationships, no children under any circumstances whatsoever. The community recruited new members exclusively through conversion and adoption of orphans. Despite this biologically unsustainable membership strategy, the Canterbury Shakers somehow kept their village functioning and spiritually active for nearly 200 years. The community did not collapse from scandal or persecution or financial ruin. It simply ran out of Shakers because nobody was producing replacement Shakers, and mathematics eventually won the argument. 24. New Hampshire's state constitution contained an official clause requiring anyone seeking public office to be Protestant. Courts eventually ruled the provision completely unenforceable under federal law, and it became legally meaningless. New Hampshire responded to this ruling by leaving the clause sitting inside the Constitution anyway. Fully readable, technically present, officially embarrassing. Other states quietly removed similar provisions when courts struck them down. New Hampshire kept theirs visible in the document like a relative nobody wants to introduce at family gatherings, but also nobody has the energy to formally ask to leave. It remained there for a remarkably long time before anyone addressed it. 25. Alan Shepard became the first American human being launched into space in 1961, and he was from Derry, New Hampshire. This would be impressive enough as a single lifetime achievement for one small town. Shepard then went to the moon 10 years later as part of Apollo 14, and while standing on the lunar surface decided to pull out a golf club he had smuggled aboard the spacecraft. He hit a golf ball on the moon and announced with complete confidence that it traveled miles and miles and miles. Derry, New Hampshire, produced the first American in space and also the first lunar golfer simultaneously. 26. New Hampshire operates state-owned liquor stores and made the strategic decision to place them directly inside highway rest stops along the interstate. Drivers heading through New Hampshire can pull off the road, use the restroom, purchase a full bottle of whiskey, and return to highway speeds without technically leaving the travel plaza. No other state in America has combined the concepts of highway rest stop and liquor retail into a single convenient location. New Hampshire tourism officials describe this as a service to travelers. Law enforcement officials in neighboring states have described it using completely different vocabulary that is less suitable for promotional brochures. 27. New Hampshire has a law making it a legal offense to check into any hotel using a name that is not your own. Checking in under an assumed name is not a quirky policy violation that gets you a stern look from the front desk manager. It is an actual criminal offense that remains technically enforceable under New Hampshire law today. Countless thriller novels, spy films, and romantic comedies have been built around the concept of checking into hotels anonymously. At every single one of those scenarios would constitute a prosecutable crime in New Hampshire, where the front desk is apparently considered a zone of mandatory honesty. 28. In 1828, a group of teenage girls working in the textile mills of Dover, New Hampshire, walked off their jobs in a coordinated protest against a wage cut management had imposed without warning or negotiation. These young women organized, made demands, and staged what historians now recognize as the first women's labor strike in American history. They were teenagers. They worked in a mill. They decided that being underpaid was unacceptable and did something about it publicly and collectively before any formal labor movement existed to give them a framework or vocabulary for what they were doing. Dover, New Hampshire, produced American labor history's opening act. Item 29. New Hampshire towns conduct something called town meeting, where the entire annual budget for the community gets presented and voted on by any resident who shows up that day. This sounds orderly until you understand that any citizen present can raise their hand, propose a change, and legally override years of careful municipal planning in a single afternoon. Selectmen present spreadsheets. Residents with strong feelings about road salt spending take the microphone. Democracy operates in its purest, most chaotic form. New Hampshire towns have been governing themselves this way since the colonial era and describe the occasional spectacular disagreements as a feature rather than a flaw. 30. New Hampshire has a town called Sandwich that sits peacefully in the mountains, minding its own business. Sandwich? England discovered this American sandwich existed and proposed an official town-twinning partnership, which is a traditional ceremonial friendship arrangement between towns sharing a name. Sandwich, New Hampshire declined. The British town extended the offer again with additional diplomatic warmth. New Hampshire's Sandwich continued declining with what witnesses described as complete indifference to the entire concept. Officials in Sandwich, England found this baffling and said so publicly. Sandwich, New Hampshire, has never explained its position and shows no signs of reconsidering a partnership with the town that technically invented the food it is named after. 31. New Hampshire built an entire tourism industry around the biological process of trees losing their leaves every autumn. Hotels charge their highest rates of the entire year during leaf season. Travel agencies create dedicated foliage tour packages. Websites publish weekly color progress reports tracking exactly how dead the leaves currently are across different elevations. Photographers drive hours to stand in New Hampshire forests, staring upward at branches. New Hampshire looked at the annual inevitability of photosynthesis shutting down for winter and correctly identified it as a premium commercial product that millions of Americans would enthusiastically pay significant money to witness in person every single year. 32. New Hampshire was once home to the largest typewriter manufacturing operation in the entire United States, and the industry employed a substantial portion of the state workforce for decades. And then personal computers arrived, and the demand for typewriters did not gradually decline in an orderly, manageable fashion. It collapsed essentially overnight with a speed that gave economic planners no time to respond meaningfully. The typewriter industry's disappearance wiped out approximately 20% of New Hampshire's entire state economy in a remarkably short window. New Hampshire went from being America's typewriter capital to having no typewriter industry whatsoever faster than most states could schedule an emergency legislative session. 33. New Hampshire has more covered bridges per square mile than any other state in New England, and locals will tell you this reflects their appreciation for historic craftsmanship and architectural heritage. The actual historical reason covered bridges exist is significantly less romantic. Builders discovered that covering the bridge with a roof protected the wooden structural elements from rain and snow, dramatically extending the lifespan of the bridge. Covering the bridge was not an aesthetic choice. It was a cost-saving measure because replacing rotting uncovered planks every few years was expensive and annoying. New Hampshire's charming covered bridges are essentially giant wooden structures wearing raincoats for purely financial reasons. 34. The Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. is one of the most important and symbolically significant buildings in the United States government, and its construction required enormous quantities of high-quality granite. Workers sourced that granite from New Hampshire, cutting it from New Hampshire mountains and shipping it to the nation's capital to construct the nation's library. New Hampshire stone holds up some of the most important books and documents in American history. Meanwhile, several of New Hampshire's own state government buildings were constructed using materials imported from other places rather than the granite sitting in abundant quantities directly underneath the state's own mountains. 35. New Hampshire's official state seal features a proud image of the USS Raleigh, a Revolutionary War-era sailing vessel meant to represent the state's maritime heritage and patriotic history. The ship on the seal is depicted flying an American Stars and Stripes flag. Historians who examined the seal noticed a problem and pointed it out carefully. The Stars and Stripes flag design was not officially adopted until 1777. The USS Raleigh was built in 1776. New Hampshire's state seal shows their historic ship flying a flag that had not been invented yet at the time the ship existed. The seal remains unchanged. 36. The Cornish Windsor. Covered bridge connects New Hampshire to Vermont, across the Connecticut River, and stretches 449 feet, making it the longest wooden-covered bridge in the entire United States. It has been standing since 1866 and continues carrying vehicle traffic today. Engineers periodically inspect it and confirm it remains structurally sound. Tourists photograph it from every possible angle. What makes this particularly notable is that New Hampshire and Vermont have a complicated neighborly relationship, involving strong competing opinions about politics, taxes, and general life philosophy. Yet they have been sharing this one very long wooden bridge cooperatively for over 150 years. 37. Yankee Magazine is the publication that defines New England culture, covers New England towns, celebrates New England traditions, and positions itself as the authentic voice of everything genuinely Northeastern. Its headquarters are located in New Hampshire. This would seem like a natural fit, except that the rest of New England treats New Hampshire with the specific mixture of affection and mild condescension typically reserved for the family member who shows up to Thanksgiving with unconventional opinions about everything. New Hampshire is considered the slightly eccentric outlier of the New England family. The magazine speaking for all of New England is run from inside the state the rest of New England finds most confusing. 38. In 1905, President Theodore Roosevelt needed a location to host peace negotiations between Russia and Japan after their devastating war and selected Portsmouth, New Hampshire for the occasion. Diplomats from two major world powers traveled to a small New Hampshire coastal city to sit across a table and formally end their conflict. The Treaty of Portsmouth was signed and the war ended. Portsmouth, New Hampshire became the only American city in history to serve as the official host of a peace treaty, formally concluding a war fought entirely between two foreign nations. Theodore Roosevelt won the Nobel Peace Prize for it. Portsmouth got a historical marker. 39. New Hampshire's section of the Appalachian Trail contains more miles above the tree line than the trail section in any other of the 14 states it passes through. Above tree line means fully exposed to open sky with no trees, providing shelter, no natural windbreak, and no protection from weather arriving from any direction at any speed. Hikers on New Hampshire's Appalachian Trail section face conditions that other trail states simply do not experience at comparable length or frequency. Rangers describe it carefully as the most technically demanding and weather-exposed stretch of the entire trail. Guidebooks describe it using adjectives that make experienced hikers reconsider their vacation plans. 40. The Strawberry Bank Museum in Portsmouth, New Hampshire is a beloved historic district preserving colonial-era buildings and educating visitors about early American life. Its name is spelled incorrectly. The E is missing from strawberry. Museum officials are fully aware the spelling is wrong by modern standards and have been informed of this many times by visitors, journalists, and presumably at least one outraged English teacher. Their official position is that the misspelling is historically accurate because that is how 17th century residents originally wrote it, and they refuse to modernize the spelling out of respect for history. The gift shop sells incorrectly spelled merchandise with great enthusiasm. 41. New Hampshire's state flower is the purple lilac, which appears on promotional materials, welcome signs, and springtime festival banners across the state as a symbol of local natural identity. The purple lilac is not native to North America. It was imported from Turkey. A flower originating in the Middle East traveled across the Atlantic Ocean, got planted in New Hampshire soil, and was eventually voted the official botanical symbol of the state. New Hampshire looked at all the flowers actually growing naturally in its own forests and meadows, and selected the immigrant Turkish flower as the one best representing authentic New Hampshire identity. 42. New Hampshire holds more political power over American presidential elections than almost any other state because it hosts the first primary in the nation every 4 years, forcing every serious candidate to spend months camping in diners and shaking hands at county fairs across the state. Candidates who lose New Hampshire frequently drop out entirely. New Hampshire essentially filters who America gets to choose between. Despite this extraordinary political influence, New Hampshire has never once produced a United States president. And the state that decides who becomes president has never sent one of its own residents to the White House in the entire history of the Republic. 43. Dartmouth College is one of the 8 elite Ivy League universities in America. Sits alongside Harvard and Yale in academic prestige rankings, and attracts students and faculty from every country on Earth. It is located in Hanover, New Hampshire, a town with one main street, approximately 11,000 residents, and the general atmosphere of a place where nothing particularly urgent is ever happening. Students arrive expecting the intellectual energy of a great university and discover it is wrapped inside what is essentially a very quiet small town that closes early. Our Dartmouth is one of the most prestigious universities on Earth located inside a town most GPS systems struggle to confidently locate. 44. New Hampshire became one of the original 13 colonies, participated in the American Revolution, ratified the Constitution, and officially became a state in 1788. For the next 121 years, New Hampshire operated as a functioning American state without an official state flag. They used old military regimental battle flags when something flag-shaped was needed for official purposes. Other states had designed, approved, and proudly displayed their official flags for generations. New Hampshire waited until 1909 to formally decide what their flag should look like, suggesting that for over a century, nobody in state government considered the question sufficiently urgent to schedule a vote. 45. New Hampshire runs a moose hunting lottery where residents and non-residents submit applications for a permit to legally hunt a moose during the designated season. The lottery receives more applications every single year than many respected American universities receive freshman admission applications. People who spend years carefully preparing their college applications with essays and recommendations are competing in a process less statistically competitive than New Hampshire's moose hunting permit system. Thousands of people are rejected from the moose lottery annually and must wait another full year before trying again. Our New Hampshire moose are statistically harder to get permission to hunt than it is to get into several decent colleges. 46. New Hampshire passed a law in 1935 specifically banning the use of ferrets for hunting purposes. Lawmakers did not arrive at this prohibition casually. The legislative record suggests ferrets were being used to hunt small game and were performing so effectively and so efficiently that the practice was considered genuinely unsportsmanlike. A ferret was apparently too good at hunting to be allowed to hunt. New Hampshire decided that fair sporting standards required removing the ferret from the equation entirely, and made their involvement in hunting a criminal matter. And the ferret has remained legally excluded from New Hampshire hunting activities for nearly 90 years without mounting any successful legal challenge. 47. The McDowell Colony in Peterborough, New Hampshire was founded in 1907 and holds the distinction of being the oldest artist residency program in the entire United States of America. Writers, composers, and visual artists have been coming to this New Hampshire property for over a century to work in quiet, private studios surrounded by trees. Thornton Wilder sat at a McDowell Colony desk and wrote Our Town, which became one of the most frequently performed plays in American theatrical history. A play performed in schools, community theaters, and professional stages across the entire country every single year was written in a small studio in a small New Hampshire town. 48. New Hampshire has an actual bobsled track built to Olympic competition specifications and used for genuine Olympic-level athletic training. This fact surprises most Americans who, when asked to locate New Hampshire on a map, demonstrate a geographical confidence that is not supported by their actual results. Athletes preparing for Winter Olympic bobsled competition travel to New Hampshire to train on a track that meets international standards. New Hampshire does not heavily advertise this facility in its tourism materials. The state that most Americans cannot reliably place on the correct side of the northeastern United States is quietly producing Olympic-caliber winter sports infrastructure in its mountains. 49. Keene. New Hampshire hosted an annual pumpkin festival that became famous for breaking the world record for the most simultaneously lit jack-o'-lanterns ever assembled in one place. Tens of thousands of glowing carved pumpkins covered the town square every October in what sounded like a perfectly pleasant autumn tradition. Then in 2014, a riot broke out during the festival, involving overturned cars and significant property damage that made national news for entirely wrong reasons. Festival organizers assessed the situation, consulted with city officials, and quietly moved the entire event to a different state. New Hampshire's record-breaking pumpkin festival now takes place somewhere that is not New Hampshire. 50. New Hampshire takes its first in the nation presidential primary so seriously that public schools across the state officially close on primary day, treating a political party election as a recognized public holiday equivalent to federal observances. Children get the day off school. Teachers get the day off. The entire educational system pauses so that New Hampshire can fully concentrate on voting first before any other state gets a turn. No other state closes its schools for a primary election. New Hampshire does this because participating in the primary is considered sufficiently important to the state's identity that educating children must temporarily wait until democracy has been properly attended to. 51. New Hampshire hosted the first intercollegiate ski race in America in 1914, then hosted the first American slalom race in 1925, and then hosted the first American downhill race in 1926. 3 separate historic firsts in American skiing all happened in the same state within 12 years of each other. Colorado did not do this. Vermont did not do this. Utah did not do this. New Hampshire quietly assembled the entire founding resume of American competitive skiing, and then watched other states build massively more profitable ski resort empires on the foundation New Hampshire laid. The invention credits stayed in New Hampshire. The revenue apparently did not feel obligated to follow. 52. New Hampshire's original capital city was not Concord. It was Exeter, a coastal town that served as the seat of revolutionary government during the earliest and most dangerous years of American independence. And the reason Exeter became the capital instead of somewhere more centrally located was straightforward and slightly embarrassing. Revolutionary War leaders were genuinely afraid that meeting near the seacoast made them too easy for British naval forces to locate and attack. New Hampshire's government spent its founding years operating from a location chosen specifically because everyone was nervous about being caught. Concord eventually became the capital once the British Navy stopped being an immediate daily concern for New Hampshire lawmakers. 53. New Hampshire passed a law banning adults from participating in bingo games at hotels and campgrounds when prizes are being awarded. A grown adult in New Hampshire cannot legally sit down at a campground bingo table and win a stuffed animal or a gift certificate without the state having regulatory feelings about the situation. Legislators apparently looked at the full landscape of pressing issues facing New Hampshire residents and decided that prize-bearing bingo at recreational facilities required formal criminal parameters. The law includes a specific provision noting it could potentially be amended if absolutely no prizes were involved, suggesting the prizes were considered the genuinely dangerous element of the bingo experience. 54. Ralph Baer was a German-born American engineer who invented the first home video game console in 1968, a device called the Brown Box that launched an industry now worth hundreds of billions of dollars annually. Ralph Baer lived and worked in Manchester, New Hampshire. Every gaming console ever built, every living room ever occupied by someone yelling at a television screen over a video game, every billion-dollar gaming company traces its conceptual origin back to an engineer working in Manchester, New Hampshire. The city of Manchester honored Baer with a bronze statue after his death. The global gaming industry has not yet organized a formal thank you card to New Hampshire. 55. The town of Killington is located in Vermont, and in 2005 its residents voted officially and formally to leave Vermont entirely and join New Hampshire instead. The motivation was straightforward. New Hampshire has no income tax and no sales tax. Vermont has both. Killington residents did the arithmetic, held a vote, and decided New Hampshire's tax situation was worth switching states over. Vermont has not forgiven this. The Vermont legislature refused to approve the secession, and Killington remains in Vermont against what its residents voted was their preference. New Hampshire gained nothing from this episode except the knowledge that at least one Vermont town would rather be in New Hampshire than stay in Vermont. 56. New Hampshire produces world-class lobster pulled from the Atlantic Ocean, maple syrup tapped from forests covering a significant portion of the state, and apple orchards that supply the entire region every autumn. Despite having these 3 legitimate and beloved food products growing and living within its borders, New Hampshire has never officially designated a state cuisine or a state food of any kind. Every option was apparently too controversial or too obvious to achieve legislative consensus. New Hampshire sits on top of genuinely excellent food, watches neighboring states enthusiastically brand their regional specialties, and has simply never gotten around to officially claiming any of it as theirs. 57. New Hampshire has a Sabbath law remaining on the official books that technically prohibits operating machinery on Sundays. The law does not specify which century it was designed for or acknowledge that modern New Hampshire contains factories, lawn equipment, commercial ice cream production facilities, and various other machinery-dependent industries that operate on Sundays without anyone considering it controversial. Now, technically, under this law, a New Hampshire resident mowing their lawn on a Sunday morning is operating outside legal parameters. Ice cream manufacturers running Sunday production shifts are technically in violation. New Hampshire lawmakers have not repealed the law. They have also not enforced it against a single lawnmower in living memory. 58. New Hampshire highway rest stops along Interstate 93 sell lottery tickets directly to drivers who have pulled off the road. A traveler can stop to use the restroom, purchase a lottery ticket, buy a bottle of whiskey from the adjacent state liquor store, and return to driving through a February blizzard on one of the more challenging stretches of northeastern Interstate Highway. New Hampshire has essentially created a rest stop experience that combines alcohol retail, gambling, and immediate return to dangerous winter driving conditions in a single convenient location. The State Tourism Board has chosen not to feature this particular combination prominently in their official welcome to New Hampshire materials. 59. The town of Alton Bay sits on the southern shore of Lake Winnipesaukee, and every winter when the lake freezes sufficiently, the town operates a fully FAA-approved airplane runway directly on the frozen lake surface. Actual aircraft land and take off from the ice. The FAA has reviewed this arrangement and granted it official approval. Pilots file flight plans to a runway that does not exist for approximately 8 months of every year and then reappears when temperatures drop far enough. Passengers boarding planes at Alton Bay do so, standing on a frozen lake, and presumably try not to think too carefully about the relationship between aircraft weight and ice thickness. 60. Beneath a ski mountain in New Hampshire sits a Cold War-era nuclear bunker that was built and designated to house the entire United States federal government in the event of a nuclear strike on Washington, D.C. The plan was that American government officials would evacuate to a ski resort mountain in New Hampshire and continue operating the country from underground while the rest of civilization addressed whatever was happening above them. New Hampshire was selected as the location where American democracy would survive nuclear catastrophe. The bunker exists today. The ski mountain above it continues operating normally, while sending skiers down slopes directly above the facility designed to outlast the end of the world. 61. Dover, New Hampshire, was established as a permanent European settlement in 1623, making it one of the oldest continuously inhabited English settlements in the entire United States of America. Dover has been occupied without interruption since before the Pilgrims fully sorted out their situation in Massachusetts. Before New York was New York, and before Boston was properly Boston, Dover, New Hampshire already had residents going about their daily business. New Hampshire contains one of the oldest continuously lived-in English settlements on the continent, and manages to mention this fact with considerably less frequency and enthusiasm than states with significantly younger founding histories spend promoting their own origins. On 62. New Hampshire towns regularly hold their annual town meetings and pass symbolic votes to secede from their own county. Not from New Hampshire, not from America, from their county. These votes carry absolutely zero legal weight, cannot be enforced, change nothing administratively, and are fully understood by everyone present to be completely meaningless from a governmental standpoint. Towns pass them anyway because residents have strong feelings about county-level governance and feel those feelings deserve formal expression. New Hampshire's town meeting tradition is so deeply embedded in local identity that residents will gather, debate seriously, vote officially, and produce a document that does nothing just to feel heard by their county. 63. New Hampshire is the only state in America with a law legally requiring real estate sellers to disclose to potential buyers if the property is believed to be haunted. Ghost disclosure is an actual official line item in New Hampshire real estate transactions. A seller who knows their house has a reputation for paranormal activity must inform the buyer before closing. Real estate agents in New Hampshire receive this information, write it into official documents, and present it across closing tables with professional composure. New Hampshire looked at the full spectrum of consumer protection legislation and decided that supernatural house histories deserved the same disclosure standards as foundation cracks and roof conditions. 64. New Hampshire opened the first free kindergarten in the United States, establishing early childhood education as a public right before any other state reached that conclusion. This is a genuinely impressive educational achievement worth considerable pride. New Hampshire currently ranks near the bottom of all 50 states in per-pupil education spending. The state that gave America its first free kindergarten is now one of the least generous states in the country when it comes to funding the education of its own children. New Hampshire invented something important, handed the concept to the rest of the country, and then apparently lost interest in maintaining its own founding commitment to the idea. 65. America's first documented serial killer was a man named H.H. Holmes, who constructed a hotel in Chicago specifically designed with hidden passages, gas lines, and a basement crematorium for the purpose of killing guests during the 1893 World's Fair. Holmes was born in Gilmanton, New Hampshire. The most notorious serial killer in American history grew up in a small New Hampshire town that has built absolutely zero tourism around this fact. Gilmanton has no H.H. Holmes Museum, no historic marker at his birthplace, no walking tour of his childhood neighborhood. Chicago at least got a best-selling book about their Holmes connection. Gilmanton got nothing and seems to prefer it that way. 66. The Kankomagus Highway stretches for 34.5 miles through the White Mountains of New Hampshire and contains 0 traffic lights for its entire length. There are 0 gas stations along the road. There are 0 towns visible from the highway, so no commercial establishments of any kind interrupt the drive. Millions of visitors travel this road every autumn to look at foliage, and every single one of them must arrive with a full tank of gas and whatever snacks they brought because the Kankomagus Highway offers the experience of driving through extraordinary natural beauty, combined with the mild existential anxiety of knowing help is not particularly nearby. 67. The town of Hooksett, New Hampshire, had 4 female librarians working at its public library in 2007, and the town voted officially to fire all 4 of them simultaneously. The stated reason was gossiping. 4 library employees lost their jobs in a single municipal action over conversations that occurred in a public library. The story did not stay local. International media picked it up. The news organizations from multiple countries filed reports about 4 librarians in a small New Hampshire town being collectively dismissed for talking too much in a building professionally dedicated to quiet. Hooksett became briefly famous worldwide for reasons its tourism committee had not anticipated or prepared promotional materials for. 68. The Piscataqua River running along New Hampshire's border with Maine moves so aggressively that modern commercial ships navigating its waters require specially certified pilots who understand the river's particular current behavior. The tidal forces pushing through its relatively narrow channel create conditions that surprise vessels whose crews have experience on far larger bodies of water. The colonial traders loaded with goods used this same violently fast river as their primary commercial route for over 150 years because it was the best option available despite being genuinely dangerous. New Hampshire was built on trade moving through a river that was actively trying to make that trade as difficult as possible. 69. New Hampshire has a law formally stating that laws themselves cannot be interpreted literally, if doing so would produce what the statute specifically calls an absurd result. New Hampshire's legal code contains an official acknowledgement that some New Hampshire laws, if followed exactly as written, would produce outcomes so unreasonable that courts are legally authorized to ignore the literal meaning and find a more sensible interpretation. And the state legislature wrote a law admitting their other laws might be absurd. New Hampshire has essentially included in its own legal system a built-in confession that not everything they have legislated was entirely thought through before being formally adopted as the law of the land. 70. New Hampshire has 18 miles of Atlantic coastline, no state income tax, no sales tax, a nuclear bunker under a ski mountain, a haunted house disclosure law, a Turkish state flower, a moose hunting lottery more competitive than college admissions, and a town called Success where nobody lives. It holds the world wind speed record, produced the first American in space, invented the home video game, hosted the conference that designed the global economy, and fired 4 librarians for gossiping. New Hampshire is objectively one of the strangest places in the United States and has somehow convinced the rest of America that it is just a quiet little state full of trees and sensible people. 71. New Hampshire's motto is "Live free or die." And at this point, that phrase is not just a slogan on a license plate. It is a complete governing philosophy applied to seatbelts, sugar dispensers, midnight voting rituals, seaweed collection after dark, ferret hunting regulations, and the structural integrity of state symbols that have already collapsed into rubble. New Hampshire does not do things the way other states do them, and has never once expressed regret about that. Every bizarre law, every empty town, every incorrectly spelled museum is New Hampshire living exactly as advertised. Freely, weirdly, completely on its own terms, and absolutely not asking anyone else for permission or approval. And that is New Hampshire, a state that banned seaweed collection after dark, keeps a collapsed rock as its state symbol, and somehow runs without collecting a single dollar of income or sales tax. So here is the question: which of these 71 dumbest things about New Hampshire absolutely broke your brain the most? Drop it in the comments right now. We read every single one. If this video made you question everything you thought you knew about American states, hit subscribe because we are just getting started. New Hampshire was just number 1 on our list. It only gets weirder from here.